hope you're all well during this very challenging time with the COVID-19 pandemics. Uh, we last semester we were forced to stop this lunchtime seminar at the end of the semester, in the middle of the semester, and I hope you're all keeping well. Although we have been organizing different webinars on different topics in the last few months. The good thing is that we're able to have a wider audience, in fact, and audience from international, international platforms. We've been having actually the three webinars we had in the last 2 months have more than thousands of people participating with us from almost every continent of the world. So this is one silver lining coming from the COVID-19 challenge. So today we're really happy to see all of you here to join us. We see all the students coming back from the campus, people joining us, and some old friends and some new friends. Thank you so much for coming together with us. CFPR will continue to have our lunchtime seminar almost every Friday, and you'll be receiving notice messages from us. We also want to announce that just today we have issued our CFPR newsletters that have been sent out through our social media on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and so on. So please check that out after the talk, and keep updated information with us. So today we are so happy to have a very distinguished professor with us, all the way from China. Professor Du Peng with us. We're so grateful, Professor Du Peng, for joining us. We regret that the trip that we had planned last semester didn't come to fruition, but we're so happy to see you online and to share with us your research on aging in Asia and more broadly in well, more specifically in China. So Professor Du has a very distinguished career in his research on aging. He is the Vice President of the Renmin University of China. He's the Director and a Professor of the Institute of Gerontology in Renmin University. He has a long list of titles throughout his distinguished careers. Currently, he is the Vice President of Chinese Gerontology and Geriatric Society, Vice President of the China Population Association. He has been a member of expert in committee, the Ministry of Civil Affairs, board member of the Help Age International during 2008 and to 2016. And also the board member of United Nations International Institute on Aging since 2008. He has served as the chair of the International Association of Gerontology and Geriatrics Asia Oceania region from 2009 to 2013. His research interest is wide-ranging but quite focused on population aging and the aging policy. His recent publications include the process of population aging in China, the older persons in China, social gerontology in EU countries, population aging and aging issues, population aging change and challenges, disabled persons and their social protections in rural China, China's population in the 21st century, and so on. So as you can see, these are a lot of aging research, not only on China, but also other regions in Asia as well. So today we're very lucky to have Professor Du Peng to come and talk to us about the development of aging policies and the long-term care services in China. So Professor Du will have about half an hour to share his work with us, and then we'll open up the question and answer period. And you are probably familiar with the Q&A at the bottom of the screen that you can send in your questions, and we'll try to ask those questions on your behalf to Professor Du during this period of time. So without further ado, we thank Professor Du again for joining us and so graciously agreed to participate in this sharing. So Professor Du, please, for your presentation. Thank you so much. We usually clap, and now I don't know what do we do this?
Thank you, Professor Yang, and also the center for giving me the opportunity to share our recent research findings on the policy and long-term care services. So I will share my screen can you see that? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. To share our research findings on the development of aging policies and long-term care services in China. Firstly, I will introduce about the background so you will understand why we have so many policies and what are the strategies to tackle the issues currently in China. And then the situation of long-term care services. Second part, I will introduce about the development of policies on aging, and also what kind of problems still we need to improve or overcome for the current policy theories. And the last part will be the new strategy in China to use the new concept of social governance of aging society, because not just the long-term care or productive aging, but general aim of the country. What's the goal for the country to achieve under the sustainable development goals? So that's mainly the three parts. First, I will introduce the key figures of population aging. The first, so we will see China's population will stop increasing in about 10 years, and the peak population will be about 1.45 billion. Currently, it's 1.4 billion. So another 50 million increase expected, and then we will have a decrease of the population. At the same time, currently we have more than 254 million old persons. By law, 60 and over is regarded as the old persons in China. If we use the 65 for old persons, currently it's 176 million, account for about 12.6% by now. And expected in 2 years, it will be about 14%. With the UN Sustainable Development Goals, after that, China announced Healthy China 2030 by the State Council in 2016. There are many key figures, key goals to be listed in the Healthy China statement. One indicator is by 2030, try to achieve the life expectancy at birth to 79 years. Currently, by the end of last year, it's 77.3. And then I will show you the population projection by 2065 under the current life expectancy projection, and also the universal two-child policy implemented since 2016. In fact, after that, the goal of the new policy is to try to have 2 children. On average, the TFR is expected to keep at 1.8. but by last year, it's only 1.5. So still many arguments whether we should have more policies to encourage the families to have more children. So that's the background. Under that background, for long-term care services, in 1994, for every year by the State Statistics Bureau, we have the annual survey on the ADL problem. So from year 2000, every 10 years, we have a census. The question is about the self-rated health, namely ADL issues, or whether they regard they are unhealthy or healthy. So the latest data will come from next November. They will use the new data collection system, the iPad, to get the new data. So that will also include the ADL problems and health status in the latest census we expected. For in the past 26 years, especially from the census data, the old persons with ADL problem difficulties is about 3%. That means these 3% old persons, they cannot manage independent living by themselves. So they need long-term care. In addition to that, another 14%, they can manage their daily life, but they need help. So it's the target of the community services for these people. So generally about 17 together, they need care. Another 83%, usually they regard themselves as healthy or pretty good for the health status. The key reason for the increasing care needs is the shrinking family size and more old persons living separately from their children. Even in the large cities, because young couples, they have their new apartments, so they tend to live separately from their parents. And the huge amount of floating population, emigration from rural areas or from the central or western part of China, the total amount is around 250 million. So huge population. Also cause the problem worse because they tend to stay in the urban areas and they don't want to return back to their hometowns. So usually in villages, you can see a huge proportion of old persons living alone. By 2020, the latest figure by the Ministry of Civil Affairs to show nationally, we have about 22.3 thousand nursing homes. They are professional nursing homes. So with 4.29 million beds and 2.15 million old residents in the nursing homes. Why I listed that as the red color? If you calculate that with the total amount of Chinese old persons, it's very interesting to find only less than 1% old people, they are living in the nursing homes. And even for the nursing homes, on average, every nursing home has about 100 beds. For the 100 beds, maybe only half of them are occupied. So every level, we can't make full use of the nursing homes to provide the services. So that's the latest figures, and we can see the challenge, not just to have enough number of nursing homes, the beds, but how to provide professional, high quality services to help these old people. And then for the future, We expect to have full, say, 412 million old persons by 2035. And by 2050, the number will be 480 million for those 60 and over. So huge number, the old persons will be doubled by today, comparing to today. So that's the background why the government will have so many policies to deal with the challenges. So the proportion by 2050 of the old people, it's about 38%. Comparing to Singapore or to Japan or Korea, Japan and Korea will be about 43% by 2050. So China will be lower than Japan, Korea, and Singapore by that time. But still, it will be doubled comparing to nowadays. Another figure I want to highlight is the 80 and over, the oldest old population. By currently, it's 30 million. And by 2035, it will be doubled. By 2050, it will keep stable at 101 million oldest old. So if we calculate with the 3% old people with the ADL problem, so there will be the care need for the ADL difficulty of old people will be 14 million. They need at least this number of old people, they need long-term care at home or maybe at the nursing homes. So this figure shows the bars shows the number of old person, and the line shows the proportion. So by 2065, the proportion will be stable at 40%, but the old persons will decline after 2055. So the peak will be around 2055. So close to 500 million, but maybe lower than that, or if we have a better health improvement, maybe around that number. So for oldest old, we can see a rapid increase, both the figures and the proportion by 2065. With that background, we can see the development of policies on China. Basically, active aging policies is the strategy for the whole policy system nowadays in China. So try to keep the health participation and the security opportunities to maximize this process. I want to highlight before I introduce the exact policies, two overarching, the two national strategies I want to mention. The first is the National Population Development Plan released by State Council 3 years ago. Two keywords in that, two sentences. One is the government will improve the policy adjustment and the mechanism for childbirth. That's try to increase the total fertility rate. And then allocate public service resources rationally that try to narrow the gap between the urban and the rural or regions. Improve development and support systems for family and to achieve a sustainable fertility rate. So that's clearly stated by the national plan. And for details, they try to have a comprehensive system of social security, old age services, health support, and a livable environment. That's one very important national strategy. The second is recently, it was released last November Also by the State Council. It's called the Medium and the Long-Term Plan for Responding Proactively to Population Aging. So for 5 key elements listed, one is to have a more financial, social, more sustainable social security system. Because nowadays almost 300 million older persons, they enjoy the pensions. So the argument is try to have a higher and higher pension level, but the national policy, national strategy, firstly, to emphasize to have a sustainable social security system. Second, about the shrinking labor force, try to establish a lifelong learning system for senior citizens and striving to achieve fuller employment and create better quality jobs. That's the countermeasure to shrinking labor force. The third is the high quality services for the elderly, including the health, education, disease prevention and treatment, rehabilitation nursing, long-term nursing, and hospice care should be established. The fourth is to emphasize the technology, to use that for the population aging, including strengthening the development of assistive technologies for senior citizens. And the fifth is to have a social, more friendly environment for the senior citizens, because with better and better social welfare system, whether how to overcome the stereotypes, that means to regard the old people as the burden of the society, how to enable them to participate in the social development. That's also a key strategy in the national plan. So that's 2 general strategy for the aging policies. Currently, we have in the past 3 or 4 years, we have more than 100 ministry policies or national policies for aging. Generally, the policy priorities, one is to narrowing the gap between the urban and the rural areas, both for pension or medical insurance or care services. The second is increasing efficiency of service integration and delivery faced by the elderly care services. We do have a lot of services for the elderly, but maybe the most needed services nobody provide there. But for cultural activities, for some other not so helpful for those ADL difficulties, they are provided. So it's not so efficient. So the policy try to focus on efficiency of the services. And the third is to change the idea to social governance of aging societies, because at the beginning, from 1950s to 1990s, it was the government's obligation to provide these services, and then in the past 20 years, they leave that to the market. But now they try to combine the 2 efforts, especially to have the grassroots level older persons to hear from them what are the most needed help. They want to have the services there. So that's an idea change from a planned economy to the market economy, and now to a new form of social governance of the aging society. So we can summarize that from 4 perspectives if we talk about active aging policies nowadays in China. One is for social security, that's one bottom line part, and then the individual health and the personal ability for every perspectives. and then to emphasize the social environment, because for age-friendly cities, for social participation, for respect for the old people, if you just have the social security, you can't enable them to be respected by the society. So the education, the cultural activities, the intergenerational relationships, they are all very important parts in this social environment. So practices, I want to highlight several characteristics by now. The policies focuses mainly on social security. We have so the figure on the right side shows the number of the policies. You can see the biggest amount of policies is about the social security. And for personal ability or individual health or social environment, we do have some policies, but comparing to social security, still we need a lot. And the policy on aging generally is still lagging behind the development of population aging, because when we have some very serious problem, and then we have some policy to deal with that. In fact, for population aging by 2050, by 2065, we already know the future. We should have some policies in advance, not just follow that. And then for the policies, the active aging policy is in the process of dynamic change. That means it's developing. And from the prominent feature is the gradual promotion of the level and the standard of security. Now we have various kinds of security, from the bottom line guarantee for those poverty to the higher level of security, social security. And the pension level raised steadily in the past 16 years. Every year we have about 5% to 10% increase of the pension level. For long-term care insurance, since 2015, we have already started the 15 city pilots. In fact, this year it should be expanded to more cities, but due to the COVID-19 pandemics, it's affected a little bit. And then for the low income support, I listed some key figures by now for those, because the government announced by the end of this year, we will eliminate the absolute poverty. So older persons is a key part of this poverty population. So that's the key figure. They already provide support for these people. And then for the whole system of the aging policy, it's a multi-layered network is maturing, including the lifelong learning, livable environment, care services supply, sewer industry, preferential treatment for the elderly, and long-term care insurance. And then for the elderly services and service system, I want to mention it focuses, the big fundamental change is the integration of home, community, and institutions. Why I'm talking about that? Because at the beginning, people talk about whether we should rely on the institutions to provide care. And then, in fact, the traditional model in China is to depend on the family members to support for the elderly. So, and now after so many years arguments, now the general idea is to seek the integration of the three models, not just only emphasize one part and criticize another one. Elderly service system is evolving from the traditional family support to socialized and market-driven services. And then the last part is the governance of aging societies. So the framework is to deal with the challenges. We should have the life cost perspective, namely not just focus on the poverty of the old person, because when they had the poor health, we have to follow that to the occupations before they entered the old age. And then we find before the occupation, they may have poor education. And before the education background, maybe they had poor, say, rural life experience. So if we have the life cost perspective, we can do a lot, not just at the old age, to prevent the poverty, to encourage the social participation in the later lives. And then for the age-friendly environment, the whole idea is to give them the opportunity to at the home and also for the outside social environment, especially to encourage the whole society to respect the old population. It's a big challenge. I will talk a little bit more about that. And then the more policies needed to, especially to empower the old persons, not just to give them the welfare, to hear from that, to get the feedback from them, because by 2050, our research finding found the old person with a higher education background will be more than 18% by 2050. These new cohorts of old people, they will have more rights. They want to have more voice heard in the development of the aging policies. So for the governance of aging societies, so one, we should strengthening the top level system design, constructing social governance system of the aging policy, to especially to encouraging policy innovation to promote grassroots service programs for the elderly, promoting sustainable care and community care, because more and more experience in China come from the grassroots innovations, not from the central government, but the central government may summarize the good practices to summarize that as national policies to encourage that. The second is to have the life course perspective to guide the policies and practices, especially for health promotion, disease promotion, and also the management of chronic disease. Developing a reasonable financing system, we try to advocate to have professional industry standards and also talent team for the further development. So that's another part for the human resources. And for the old persons to create a good social and cultural environment for the social participation of the elderly. I want to, in addition to age-friendly modification of livable environments, I want to focus on the internet interaction and the digital divide. During the COVID-19 pandemic, in fact, if you go out of the communities, they will ask you to show the code of health on the mobile phone. But for many old persons, they may not use mobile phones. They are not familiar with the code. So even for the payment, when they purchase the goods on internet, it's very difficult for the old persons to get the help or get the services or the purchase. So how to encourage the old persons to use the internet to follow up the trend of the development. It's also a big challenge. We need to have more policies on that. During the last 4 or 5 months. I also had some interview by the radio or the TV to talk about that. In fact, try to use online ticket by the train, by the museums. They are also the obstacles for the old persons to prohibit them for some social activities. That's a new topic for research and the policy, how to integrate the old persons in it. And another part is the focus on the needs of the elderly, empowering the old person, especially for education of the elderly. Last year, in fact, the national education plan for the long run list elderly education as part of the national education system. Before that, the majority of the education for elderly was regarded as cultural activities. It's not education programs, it's culture programs. So it's very important to give the opportunity, especially now we have a webinar, and in fact we have many courses can be provided online. It also give old persons more opportunities to learn from their the various of courses to sacrifice their knowledge needs for their learning. We need to have some policies for that. So that's some general introduction about the background of population aging in China, and the national strategies try to follow up the sustainable development goals and the healthy China 2030, and then the policy developments in China, and under the new framework of social governance of aging society, what we are trying to do for the policy developments. So I will stop here to for any questions and comments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Professor Du. Now we can stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the very comprehensive overview of the rapidly aging society in China. Indeed, this trend is some experience that we have never seen in human histories. As you said, there will be a peak at 2055, probably with 500 million of older adults in the country, particularly the oldest old, those who are 80 and above, would be a really large proportion of the population in China. So this indeed is a huge challenge, and you've given us a nice overview of how the responsibility of caregiving for older adults has been shifting from the traditional mode of family care to government taking more responsibility, communities taking more responsibility, and indeed the private markets taking up more responsibility too. The coordination and integration of all these services, of course, is a huge challenge. We also see that there's a lot more emphasis about on the individuals themselves, the older adults, to take care of themselves, keep themselves healthy, and this lifelong learning approach was emphasized, which is similar to what Singapore was doing too. I was interested in your view about the strategy of extending the retirement age, which you mentioned at the very end of your talk. And as you say, people are still healthy at age 60 and 65 and even probably 70s and so on. But the retirement age remains very young, especially for women. And that, of course, is a huge sources of human capital that will do China well in this rapidly aging society. So I was wondering why it's taking so long for the government to take action in adjusting these retirement policies, extending the age. Can you talk about that, please? And
Okay.
let me also remind people to, you can send in some questions through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Thank you. Professor Du, please. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you for your comment and also the question. In fact, during my presentation, I listed that there,
Yeah.
but now I can say more about explain the situation. In fact, when we talk about population aging in China, especially after we have huge number of pension receivers, so people talk more about the burden. So try to, from that standpoint, they try to encourage they mentioned the postponement of the retirement age. But in fact, almost 20 years ago, that's in 2002, in January, I was in New York to, on behalf of China, to draft the action plan for the Second World Assembly on Aging. I noticed, and also we agreed, there is one special article on that to have every country try to have a flexible retirement system. So for flexible retirement system, it's agreed in China. In fact, in Shenzhen, in Beijing, for some special groups of professionals, they already have the flexible retirement age. But for national policy, when we try to postpone the retirement age, we have to think about the new, the young generations, young people's employment, their job opportunities, to balance that with the postpone of the retirement age. So I want to give you a figure of that. This year, almost every year, 12 million new jobs created in the past 2 years. But this year, only for universities, we have more than 8 million graduates. So that means the majority of the new jobs will be occupied for these graduates. So you have to secure these jobs to encourage the young people to have the jobs. And then that's why in the past 1 or 2 years, in fact, people talk about the delay the retirement age, but in fact, it's not possible at this stage because more and more young people, you have to have a job for them. At the same time, we don't have the system, the policy to postpone the retirement age. One example I usually give is in Beijing and Shanghai. Rarely you can see the middle-aged persons to drive the taxi. But I'm not sure whether that's the same situation in Singapore, but in Japan, in Korea, you can see many old drivers around 17. So, but in Beijing, it's impossible. Only young people, 30 or 40, they are the taxi driver. But what are the policies if we want to encourage the local drivers to join this team? So we need not just postpone the retirement age, but how to have the new policies. We really appreciate their efforts, their contribution to the city, and give them the opportunity. So that's why I mentioned we talk about the retirement age, but we need more policies and especially balance the jobs for young people to the job of old persons. Thank you.
I see. We also seen research says the old people actually take up somewhat different jobs than the young people, and that there may not be one-to-one replacement rate in the labor market. But coordinating this, of course, is very a very big challenge, which I definitely agree. I realize that you're not able to send in questions through chat, but you can raise your hand if you have a question and unmute yourself to ask the questions. May I invite more questions, please? Professor Fong, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor Du, for this wonderful presentation. I would rather ask you in this way. I have a question about because you are one of the main scholars get involved into the national policy making in China's aging matters. I would like to ask about the top design issues for the future, because 50 years ago, I mean, birth planning committee is very powerful agent in the national government. And now it changed to population aging. But so far, I see the national aging committee is not as powerful as the birth planning committee. So in terms of top design, what will be your suggestions or predictions in regard to the future of China? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In fact, since 2 years ago, there are some fundamental change for government agencies. One new agency is for Medical Security Bureau. It's National Bureau for Medical Security. They are in charge of the medical insurance and also the long-term care insurance. That's very independent bureau, separated from the Social Security Ministry and from the Health Ministry. And then, as you mentioned, the family planning, in fact, they merged into the public health ministry, and they formed two new departments. One is healthy aging. So they are in charge of the aging issues, and especially to plan the family welfare for these old persons. Another is the family welfare. Because now the national policies try to encourage young couples to have more children. But in fact, especially in cities, due to the higher cost and the changing perception for childbearing. So we need a lot of services for the kindergarten, and also subsidies for the childbearing. So these two government departments, they from both sides, one for the old persons, one for the young couples and their families. In fact, they drafted, and also they are very active for the policy making from these two perspectives. But by now, it's now so the fertility level is now so ideal, still lower than expectation. So more policies or more welfare is asked from, but I'm not sure whether it's working or not. But the direction is to give more support, more welfare along that way. In fact, many experience in Japan, in Korea to encourage the fertility, to raise the fertility is learned, is noticed, but still, in fact, for academic meetings or research, many research on the 0 to 3 years old children, their welfare and family support are done in the academics and the government policy research. So it's very interesting direction. More actions, I think, in the next year may be taken by the government to encourage the fertility perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question from the floor from Dr. Eileen Wong. The medical cost is rising in China. Is there any move or the government policies to utilize more on the Chinese medicine, given the demographic shift and the high cost?
Okay.
For the Chinese medicine.
Personally, and also from the research findings, I think the biggest achievements in the past 5 years, especially the last 2 or 3 years, they include the universal coverage of pension system. That means every old person enjoy the pension. So it's a very big achievement, especially when you think about the 500 million old persons by 2050. How to keep that sustainable is a huge challenge, but by now it's an achievement. The second is, as the question asked, the medical insurance. In fact, in the past 2 years, 90% medical cost can be reimbursed by the insurance. So it's a fundamental change comparing to 5 years ago. That means a very big achievement by the medical insurance system. And then the third is the Chinese traditional medicine. In fact, even for some chronic diseases, last year and even especially after this year's COVID-19 pandemic, the Chinese traditional herbs are more emphasized, and especially in the community services center, the medical services, they are encouraged to provide the traditional Chinese medicine. And also, I think that's a new era for Chinese medicine, not just because the COVID-19 is useful, it's working for this disease, but also even we have a very modern medicine for cancer. Still, we need some Chinese medicine for rehabilitate, to help the people to adjust to some syndromes from the medicine taken. So I think it's very bright future for Chinese traditional medicine.
Okay, I have another question that says that family members are worried about sending their older parents or grandparents to the elderly home because of the stigma. Would there be an ideological change on filial piety in China in the near future, you think?
Yeah.
This is from Shuya. Thank you.
Yeah, it's also a very good question, and it's a dynamic changing direction in China. Because when people talk about filial piety, traditionally people think we should provide care as the family members to keep the old people at home. But in the past 2 years, both sides are changing. But for family members, the best practices of filial piety is to guarantee their old parents to have the best service. It's not at home, but anywhere, maybe at the community center or at the nursing homes, if they can provide professional care better than at home, that can be regarded as the filial piety. So not just as family members. On the other side is the nursing homes or apartments for the elderly. They try to, because of the maturing experience of their development, they have a better and better reputation, especially for some high quality nursing homes. So people realized it's not the traditional village nursing homes, but it's very modern, very with dignity to live there, to get better health, better care. So from both sides' efforts, I think it's changing. But still, we can see a lot of arguments if you just say, I send my parents to nursing homes. Many people will not understand why this happened. But for old persons, children, they know which is better for their parents. So I think that's a new tradition changing to the modern perceptions. So I think that that also gives many opportunities for the new professional care providers. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question is asked about the, can you elaborate on policies for enabling the older adults other than sending them to schools or education of the elderly, 老龄大学, for example? Are there other ways to enable the older adults?
Yeah. In fact, tomorrow I will go to Shanxi province. They will have a national conference for health or culture tourism forum. In fact, for many cities or villages, they try to have the old persons as the volunteers, or they can have some learning at the site for tea making or growing or pottery making. So not just at the U3A, University for Third Age, but also they can have more opportunities in the communities, not just for U3A, but also for volunteering work in the communities.
Thank you. Can you also talk about what are some of the strategies to integrate the home-based care and community-based care better than before, so they work more efficiently? Yeah, several people are wondering about how the integration issues and what are the more effective strategies to involve communities and home-based care.
Okay. Home-based care, in fact, is the biggest share in the care, especially in the communities. But the policies are changing to enable the nurses or medical professionals to visit their homes. In the past, due to the security reasons, it's prohibited. But now we have some good practices, especially in Qingdao, Shandong province. They have some local doctors, to tour the old peoples at their home to give some professional guide or diagnosis for these old people. Especially in Shanghai at the community levels and the Nanjing city, the site is without a wall, the nursing home without a wall. So to provide the professional care, but at their home. So that's the new direction for many cities. But it depends on the insurance system and also the medical authorities to allow them to merge the medical and social services. During the COVID-19, one challenge is because old people, if they had some medical problems, but they could not go to the hospitals. So if they go to the hospitals, maybe it's now difficult, it's not so easy to return back to nursing homes. It also amplified the need to have integration of medical and social care at one place so that they can share the care responsibilities. Many government authorities, they already rethink about the integration after the COVID-19, how to merge that better. I think it's also part of the lesson from the COVID-19.
Thank you. The integration for the shifting boundaries of care responsibility between family, community, and government and market, NGO included, is indeed a very big issue. There's also increasing concern about the isolation and loneliness of older adults, and particularly, well, I guess in both urban and rural areas in China. Can you talk about how Chinese government or China plan to address these issues, please? And how prevalent the issue is.
About the
isolation and loneliness of older adults.
So that it's very good direction we follow that in rural areas. I can give you an example. So we followed in Shandong, Hebei, and Shanxi province. Some rural areas, One example is the Sunjiazhai in Xingtai City in Hebei province. They have a dumpling program, dumpling every 2 weeks. So more than 1,000 old persons, they will gather there to make dumpling, and they celebrate birthdays, and they have some cultural performance or some health education during half days. So it's very good example, not just for the food of dumpling, but a chance for the people to chat together, to know some new knowledge, and to get some hair cutting free services. And so the local government try to copy that model to more villages. Every year we travel to there to see whether that's sustainable. On the other hand, only the old persons, they are left behind at the villages, but every old person, they have their piece of land. And the village, they pour that together to produce some foods and sell the products outside to make the money to support their dumpling program, service programs there. It's very interesting experience for China. If we duplicate that model or to give the same spirit to more provinces, we can, it's also grassroots level innovation from the villages. So to solve the problem, not just the isolation, loneliness, but also to give them daily care needs support.
Great. Can you give us a specific example of how technology has been used? Please, you had talked about technology and some of the success stories before we wrap up.
Okay. I think it's also part of the COVID-19 stories. Due to the old people cannot go to the hospitals, and also it's very popular to have the online medical doctors to give diagnosis from the internet. So the policy is to guarantee that can be reimbursed the cost. And then the old people do not need to travel to the hospitals to risk the COVID-19 there. And then there's a fundamental change for many old persons to have the internet medicine. And then they can have the medicine from the hospital by the delivery to save their time, especially to keep them safe at the home or nursing homes. That's the latest utilization of the internet.
Great. Thank you, Professor Du, for giving us a very insightful presentation. We got a lot of positive feedback for your talk, and we have people from who are interested in similar situations, probably in different scales in other countries too. I have a question about Nepal and different countries too. So I think you've given us a lot of fruits for thoughts, and we really appreciate you joining us, and we've learned a lot about China's strategies and so on. So we're already 5 minutes over time. Thank you so much for Professor Du's presentation, and thank you everyone for your participation. And in 2 weeks, CFPR will have our next webinar on the 28th, August 28th, talked about affirmative action in Malaysia and South Africa. So please join us then. And finally, let's give Professor Du a round of applause if we can, or use your use your applause.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Du.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we hope to have you back again in person next time. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody.
Thank you.